Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, we're here today with Laraine and Chuck Chamberlain. How are you?
We're doing good.
Fantastic.
I'm so glad to have you here. You want to tell us a bit about yourself, what you do?
So we're Chuck and Laraine Chamberlain. We've been married actually for going to be 43 years this year.
Yeah.
So we've been married a very long time.
We were married at 5 years old.
Right. We're all about mental health and resilience. You know, we have 6 children. We have 16 grandchildren. We have lived all over the United States, on the East Coast, the West Coast. We've lived in China. We've had a lot of different experiences in our life that most people don't have. I mean, we seem to think that we've been around the block a few times. We've currently been teaching in China, in Beijing.
The last 3 years.
Yeah, teaching English and journalism and leadership to young students who plan to be diplomats for China.
Wow.
So that's been kind of exciting.
Unusual university there, yes.
Yeah.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. So we just Chuck left the corporate world.
Long time
Wow, 15 years ago. And just said, and he said, I'm done with the corporate world. I want to do something that can bless people's life instead of just making money for a whole lot of people. That kind of started our journey. Yeah.
So it's been an uphill and downhill and everything in between journey to get where we are right now. So.
Right.
Yeah. And I know now you're working on a few projects with resilience. How did you get started with that specific topic?
You know, we've had to, it's almost by force. I mean, you either have to get resilient or not. I mean, and then what's the alternative, right? I mean, we've had some very difficult things, some abuse in the family, disability. I was actually physically disabled. I mean, things were pretty bad. And we had to learn some ways of dealing with life. And we've always thought, wouldn't it be great if we could not only just learn these things, but teach them to other people and be available to help people through things that they're going.
So I guess you could say we've kind of had to learn the hard way through our own experience how to get through these situations. And then we're able to put some of those things together, which is why we decided to create the book, Threads of Resilience, because it was like we took these little pieces of things we learned and then we wanted to share that with other people.
That's awesome.
We also have learned some tools that we are incorporating in our online courses. So that's also once you have some tools, it helps you to look around and say, well, where can I use these tools mental health wise?
Yeah. So let's first start by, why is resilience important? We all know it is, but really, why?
Do you want to live? Do you want to wake up tomorrow morning and be like, hey, we're still alive? But I think resilience is important just because we do live in really difficult times. And you have a choice to either be like scared, afraid, anxious, or you have a choice to go with the flow of it and recognize there are some really cool things that are still in the world, that are still around us in our life. And when you start concentrating on the positive instead of the negative, oh my goodness, your life changes.
Yeah. So how could a person start becoming resilient?
You can't just wake up one day and be completely resilient where the day before you weren't. I mean, it starts with little pieces, little bits at a time. And we call them in the book, we call it threads, little threads. So you're building this rope, and the more threads you put into that rope, the stronger it gets. So some of the things that you might think about are we start out with being grateful, just start out saying, what am I grateful for today? It can't coexist with fear and disgust and all these things. It takes over. I mean, if you're truly feeling grateful, it takes over your heart and it kind of chases away all the negative. It's a great way to start being resilient is through gratitude.
Can I share with you just a little example of that? That'd be all right? So this is where I actually really had to put this into practice. So back 20 years ago or so, we were in a really difficult circumstance. Chuck was unemployed for 2 years, so we had no income. We had 6 children. Many of them were teenagers. 3 or 4 of them were teenagers. We had a daughter that kind of had an unexpected pregnancy at that time. Chuck was also disabled, which was just a little bit crazy. And because it was lasting so long, the kind of person that's like, okay, we can endure this. I thought it was, I've been a pretty much positive person, optimistic person, but it kept going and going and going. until I didn't realize that what was happening, because it was lasting so long, I was just starting to turn bitter and angry. Sometimes you just think, I can think positive and get my way out of this. I can work this through. But when it just seemed to be getting worse and worse, I didn't realize actually that I had turned that into kind of bitterness and being cynical, until I went to lunch with a friend of mine. And I just kind of dumped on her, everything that was going on. And she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, Laraine, you're just getting bitter." And I was like, what? Like bitter? Like that kind of person is toxic. That kind of person is not who I want to be. Like that's not me. But it just hit me like a force that all these difficult things in my life, I was just so cynical and so angry about everything because I felt helpless. Like I didn't even know how to get out of it anymore. I didn't know what to do. So I went home and honestly, I just got on my knees and I was like, God, I need help. Like, I need help. Like, this is the last thing I want to be, as a bitter, cynical person. That's not who I am. Please, like, tell me, what do I do? And it was interesting because the answer I got was, you need to learn to be grateful. Focus on what you are grateful for. Now, interesting that, as I get up from that prayer and I'm thinking, really? Because there's nothing to be grateful for. Like, my first reaction really was my state of bitterness. Like, I'm like, there's nothing. And then I had to say, like, okay, I'm grateful for the sun. Okay, I'm great. I do have a roof over my head. And actually, we had a very nice home. I have food in my house. I still have my children. My husband isn't dead. He's with me, and I started to think of those things. And at first it was a very forced, I'm forcing myself, and it didn't feel like it. Like, it didn't feel like it was real. It didn't feel like I even meant it, but I said it out loud. And what happened every day as I said that out loud, all of a sudden it changed something inside of me. My heart started to change. And then I started to recognize, well, I really am grateful that my husband is still alive. I really am grateful I still have a roof over my head. My children are healthy. And it just changed something inside of me. And then I was able to focus on the good things that were happening, the little things. And when you appreciate that, it builds on that. And all of a sudden I felt stronger. I felt more optimistic. I felt like we're going to get through this. Just that little switch. Oh my goodness, made all the difference.
Yeah. When you're focusing on the good and you're grateful, then you come up with solutions to what you really need because you're not stuck in the problem.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard. This sounds so trite, it just really does. And for some people, it's really, really hard. It kind of ties into some mental health issues as well. If you really struggle and you say to yourself, I really want to be grateful today, and I'm planning to be grateful, but you just have everything fall apart mentally and emotionally, that can be hard. And so I think a lot of times the answer is having good principles like that, gratitude. But the other side is the mental health side of it. And it's very important to also realize that there are ways of dealing emotionally and mentally as well.
Another thing, because I know a lot of people hear gratitude a lot, and people are like, yeah, I've heard that before. That's what everybody says, right? But another part of being resilient is to trust in the flow of your life. Like, just learn to trust in the flow, because we all have life and we have these, these flows. We go up and we go down. And if we can all recognize that everybody has them, there's nobody that just goes, life is easy. We all do that. And so sometimes when we're up on that high, we're feeling great, life's wonderful. And as we come down into those deep valleys, we need to trust the flow that says, things like this happen. We can learn from these things. What can I learn from it? And then as we start to go back up and then we're out of that, then we can look back and be like, oh my goodness, what did I learn from that? I gained so much strength. I gained so much insight. I have more compassion. And it's just trying to really focus on it. I'm going to trust that this flow in my life is good and it's going to lead me to a good place. And just, again, going in that stream of that's where my focus is, that makes me more resilient. That helps me get through the day. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. You're going to get out of it and not going to stay like that forever. Exactly. And just learn from it, gain the tools from it. So being full of gratitude, knowing the flow, what else could someone do to become more resilient?
Well, I think one of the things that we have trouble with the most, I think, is uncertainty. This virus, for one thing, the hardest thing for most people is the uncertainty. It's really not the virus. It's not even what's going on right now. It's what about the future? No, it's so uncertain. And I think we need to start and recognize that it is possible to embrace uncertainty. And there are actually benefits of uncertainty. if you think about it, if this world was always certain, if everything happened the way you think it will happen, what a boring life, right? I mean, it would not be worth living. It would be just the most boring thing. We have things happen in life that cause uncertainty, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And we struggle with that in society. So for instance, we have this phone. This takes away all uncertainty. You know, and it used to be when we were young, you would wonder things. Oh, I wonder this and I wonder that. And then you would, if it was important, you would dig into it and find an answer. Well, this, you just Google it, right? And so we've gotten so used to these quick answers that we forgot that there's really value in uncertainty. We form hypotheses, and we test things, and we learn, and you know, there's some real value in not always being certain about things. And I think that's one thing, that if we can embrace uncertainty and recognize that, hey, the answers will come, it'll be okay, then that goes a long way to resilience.
So something that helps you with that, and it's one of the exercises we do in our class, is that when you look back on your life and we make a mental note of different things we've gotten through in our life, then we start to recognize, I have been through difficult times, and so that means I can get through more difficult times, you know, which helps us with the uncertainty. And I think that's really good for children too. Sometimes we want to protect our children from hurts, from pain, from losing at a game, from all of those things. And we're really depriving them of building resilience. We're depriving them of the opportunity to grow, to learn, to say, I can do hard things because I've had to do hard things. And I think that that's really important, that we recognize that. We can look back in times in our life and see the growth. And then we can start to say, now, what did I do when that happens? And make that list of those things. What did I do to overcome that? And we can use those same tools that we did to help us overcome current situations. And so that makes a difference. Another thing you can do is to let go. Letting go is so hard. We want to hang on to our hurts. We want to hang on to our belief systems that don't serve us. We want to hang on when we realize that the freedom we get when we let go. Like, you just have to let go. If someone's hurt you in the past, and even really serious kind of hurt, at some point when you let go of it, that gives you the freedom to choose, and mostly the freedom to choose happiness, the freedom to choose joy. Because when we hang on to those things, it's like dead weight. It drags us down in our mind. It drags us down in our bodies. It can cause disease. It can cause illness. And when we just say, okay, it's time just to let this thing go. Wow. Freedom, the resilience, the strength.
Lift weight just goes right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think something else, a sense of humor. You know, I think back on times with my grandparents, horrible things happened, and they would come out laughing, you know, so I had a good example. My grandfather had 2 replaced hips, and he walked with 2 canes. And I remember one day a big wind took him and threw him in the ditch, you know, and we went running over there to see if he was okay. We thought he was going to be really moaning in pain. But as we got closer, what we heard was laughter. I mean, those kinds of things. We can find things to laugh about, even in the midst of difficulty.
Yeah. How does resilience play out in a relationship? What happens to a relationship when the couple is resilient?
Well, it surely builds and bonds you. If you're not resilient, it can destroy you. And that's why it's so important when things happen, especially difficult things. I'm amazed at how many times, like if there is a child that's really sick in a family that goes through a disease, lots of times it separates the couple. Like they end up, you know, it destroys the relationship instead of strengthening their relationship. We interviewed this lady not too long ago about resilience, and she was sharing the example of her daughter. Her daughter had lost a baby. This was their first baby, and it became a stillbirth. And that was really, really difficult for her daughter and her husband, because they had, really just changed their life to prepare for this child.
A room set up for the nursery, and it was sad.
But she said this phrase that was so interesting. She said, what they chose to do was to lean toward each other to build that strength. Oh my goodness, think about that. Because we tend to want to separate. And we have to recognize that when you're in relationship, resilience is strengthened by that relationship. You know, when you continue to build the relationship, you continue to recognize that we need to do things to make sure the relationship stays strong. Then when difficult things happen, you recognize that you're solid in the relationship. That's one thing in our marriage that Chuck and I have always done. Like, it was our priority. Like our relationship was the number one thing in our marriage. We made sure that we went on a date, once a week. We spent time together. Now that sometimes was just going to a parking lot at Safeways and having a conversation with our children. Sometimes it was just going for a walk together. But we made sure over the years that our relationship comes first. And so that way, because we were able to build resilience, not just separately, but together, then that bonds us together. And then when life happens and it's difficult, it's easier because we're doing it together. We're facing the challenge together. We're having discussions about it. We're clearing the air with it. If I'm feeling bad about something, in the relationship, I can voice it. I can say, I am feeling this. This is how I see the situation. I need this. I need that. And then as we do that together, we have that solid force to be able to deal with whatever's going on in our life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Resilience takes a lot of work. So by doing your work together with your partner, you're building the relationship together, and you always go back to it and grow on it even more. 100%.
Exactly. Because we always like to say marriage isn't hard, life's hard. And if you're both working on life and you're both working on resilience, the marriage part becomes easy, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have to deal with it by yourselves. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, awesome.
Exactly.
Any last piece of advice?
Well, I think that we need to recognize that we're living in really turbulent times. And so this is a little bit, what's going on in the world today, even with this virus and stuff, it's really thrown a lot of people off. I mean, it's been really difficult for people. But we need to recognize that if we can overcome this, the next ones that come along, because they're going to come along, there's going to be more challenges in our life. The world's going to become a little more turbulent. They're kind of headed in that direction. But the good news is we can handle it. We can do it because we get through this little blurb, in our economy, this little blurb in our feelings, this little blurb in this adversity. We're going to have those strength to get us through the next one and the next one. And we're going to not only be able to get through it, but find joy in it and happiness in it, and recognize that life is to celebrate. Relationships are to celebrate. And even in the most difficult times, we have things to celebrate. So
yeah. Great. Thank you so much. Been awesome. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment below so I can know what you think. And to book your relationship photo shoot, CJ session, or just to hear more about what we do, go to lifepicksrelationships.as.me. I'm waiting.